Bitcoin this Monday morning is right at $100,000 a coin. It's up $2,000 as we speak. And look who's here, Anthony Pompliano. He knows a lot about the crypto business. And he says, good morning, Anthony. He says Bitcoin is the new S&P 500. Okay, make your case.
Well, if you look at what the S&P 500 is, it's really a benchmark for most investors. And if we look in 2024, only 4 or 5 different hedge funds actually outperformed the S&P 500. So it serves as this great benchmark to say, are you doing better or worse than the market? But the problem with the S&P 500 is that it doesn't trade 24/7, 365. Bitcoin does. And Bitcoin is also a very large asset with a very liquid market that is constantly trading. It's the most sensitive asset to global liquidity. And the younger generation is now using this as their benchmark. And their theory is that if you can't beat Bitcoin, you have to buy Bitcoin.
But there's room for 2 benchmarks, isn't there?
There's always room for multiple benchmarks, but I think what really people are trying to get at is what is the market actually performing? And if you look at the S&P 500, gold outperformed the S&P 500 in 2024. And so if gold is outperforming and doesn't have earnings, doesn't have cash flow, a lot of people start asking themselves, well, how much of the S&P 500 performance is actually just currency debasement rather than the businesses getting better?
All right. MicroStrategy. We understand they're going to buy another $2 billion worth of Bitcoin. I tend to think that if I wanted to get into Bitcoin, MicroStrategy is the way to go because they've got this huge warehouse full of Bitcoin, right? So it's a good way to go to Bitcoin. You disagree, I know you do.
Well, there's 2 things that I would say. First of all, what MicroStrategy is doing is they're really pioneering a new corporate finance methodology, which is allowing people to use Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And there's a number of companies now that are copying them across the world. And I think that's a great thing. They also are bringing Bitcoin to pools of capital that previously didn't have exposure. So there's a convertible debt market. Now they're using this perpetual preferred equity. And so there's lots of insurance companies and pension funds, et cetera, that are going to be able to get access. But for the average person, if you go and you talk to Bitcoiners, what they'll say, and I think even Michael Saylor has said, is that you should learn about Bitcoin. You should go read the white paper. You should educate yourself. You should buy Bitcoin. You should learn how to do self-custody. Once you've done that, then you can go and play with the variety of different ways to get exposure, whether that's the ETFs, MicroStrategy, or anything else. But until you actually understand Bitcoin, it's really hard to kind of go to the 201 or 301 levels.
If President Trump does not go for a national Bitcoin or new crypto reserve, what happens to Bitcoin? It goes down, doesn't it?
Bitcoin is going to be successful regardless of who the president is or what they do. But if Donald Trump decides that he should establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve, I think that Bitcoin and Bitcoin holders will be very happy.
And if he doesn't decide to do it, that's baked into the market, Bitcoin goes down.
Possibly. If he came out and he made an announcement that said, I'm not going to do it, then yeah, I do think that there would be some short-term price action. But over the long run, it doesn't matter who the president is.
You will never admit to any difficulty for Bitcoin, will you?
Listen, I actually think that there's a lot of things on the longer-term horizon that are big issues for Bitcoin. One of the things is there's a trade-off, right? A lot of people bought Bitcoin early on because it was outside of the system. Now, if you want mass adoption, you have to have Wall Street and other organizations bring it into the system. And so there's these paradoxes that kind of exist that I think hardcore Bitcoiners would say are risks. But also, if you want Bitcoin to be successful and get mainstream adoption, the people who hold it are going to change, the market structure is going to change, and also the asset is going to have to change as well. And we've seen that happen over the years.
Happy New Year, Mr. Pompliano. Good to have you with us today, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks, man.